Orion in the Dark, a new DreamWorks animation movie that was just released on Netflix. This movie is about a young boy named Orion who is scared of everything. Whatever you can think of, he is scared of. And one night he's visited by a darkness, or dark, the anthropomorphic being of darkness at least, visits Orion, and he convinces Orion to join him on his, you know, daily routine, I guess you can say, as he spreads darkness around the world, so you can learn not to be afraid of the dark and hopefully overcome his fears in general. So, this movie is well animated. It has some cool, interesting characters. Um, has a lot going for it, but unfortunately, I thought it was just an average, okay movie. I didn't love it. I didn't really know what to expect. I remember watching the trailer once a while ago, and I didn't really keep up with it, so I haven't heard much about it. Um, this movie kind of reminds me of Inside Out. That movie has anthropomorphic beings, emotions, and we followed them through a journey, and we learn about them and the importance of them, like sadness. Even though sadness would be considered a negative thing, we find out why sadness is important. And this movie is kind of similar in that aspect. We follow darkness and eventually some of his friends who are anthropomorphic beings of the night, like dreams, sleep, and quiet, and a couple of other ones. And you think you're going to go through this journey to learn the importance of darkness, and you kind of do, or at least they try to emphasize why darkness is important. But I don't think it's the story is told very well, and by the end of it, you don't really. Well, I didn't really care about these characters. It's not that you're gonna go hate them or anything like that. I just thought they were okay, and I think the story kind of fails them in a way. It kind of fails the main character Orion as well, as I think his story isn't well put together. It's okay, and I mean it accomplishes what it wants to set out to accomplish, but I don't think it does it in a very enjoyable, satisfying way. At least not to me. Um, like I said, the animation was my favorite part. There's a lot of cool effects, because you have daylight and nighttime. So I love the effects of night, covering cityscapes and everything, and it looks very beautiful. And then this is kind of the same thing when light comes and overtakes darkness. It's kind of very beautiful scenery and images. Um, like the character designs, Darkness is simple, but I like his design. I like his friends' designs for the most part as well. Some of them are a little bit more complex, but they're very interesting. And that, like I said, the animation is really good. It's mostly CGI. And then you have portions that they might be computer images, but they look like hand drawings and everything like that, which are really cool. You see them throughout the film for certain sections, oftentimes where Orion is imagining being scared. Um, but unfortunately, that's besides the animation. I think the story kind of fails, and like I said, the characters are okay, but I don't think we get to the point where we absolutely love them. Um, this movie is a 5 or 6 out of 10 for me. Like I said, it's average. I don't think it's a bad movie. I don't think it does anything necessarily bad. It's just average, and it's very close to just kind of being boring, in my opinion. It's definitely a movie that I might not watch again. If someone else is watching, I might watch it, but I'm definitely not going to go out and seek to watch it. But it's an okay movie. I do recommend you check it out, even though I think it's average. That's just my opinion. You might get more out of it. I just kind of felt like they could have done more. And I think it could have been a little bit more interesting, and they just kind of faltered in the story, in my opinion. So 5 out of 6, I think go check it out, especially if you're a big DreamWorks fan. So I want to talk spoilers. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Spoilers. If you haven't seen the movie, get out of here because I'm about to spoil it. So like I said, we follow Orion, and at the beginning of the movie, it kind of drags. Like there's 10 minutes of him just talking about all his fears and everything, and I think it takes a long time, and then finally darkness comes. He just kind of comes out of nowhere, and I guess everyone in all the darkness and his friends know Orion because he's a loud kid who ruins nighttime for them for some reason. So again, Darkness convinces Orion to join him to, go out on his daily routine or his nightly routine, whatever you want to call it. And eventually they meet his friends. Like I said, it's dream, quiet, sleep, odd noises, I think, and insomnia. And then he joins them as they go out about doing their things, and he interferes a little bit, but eventually he learns to accept them. Um, but like I said, it's just kind of going along. It's not very interesting. It's not really much developments. Orion just kind of accepts darkness and everything. He's like, okay, this is kind of cool, and I kind of like it. And we didn't really learn why some of these people are important. Like, why is insomnia important to darkness? Why is that something we need? And how quiet and odd noises or whatever that other one's called kind of conflict with each other, and they're not really necessary. They don't really dive too deep into it, but it just I feel like like I said with Inside Out, you have sadness, and they kind of explain the importance of sadness, and you don't really get the importance of these creatures. They do say something a little bit better later about why darkness is important, but I don't think it applies to everything, all these other beings. Um, so this is where we get to the point where I think the story really suffers. So it turns out this is a story within a story, which turns out to be a story within a story within a story. Orion, the adult Orion, is telling this story to his daughter Hypatia, who's also afraid of the dark, like the young Orion. And we cut back and forth between adult Orion telling the story to his daughter. And like I said, this is I think where it suffers because, like I said, Orion quickly learns to accept darkness, but Hypatia is like, well, you can make him afraid if you're still afraid of the dark. It's okay. It doesn't have to be a clean cut story like with happy endings and everything like that. Um, so all of a sudden, in the story, he admits that he's still afraid of darkness, and he convinces the other beings, the night beings, how great light is and everything like that. So they're like, we don't like darkness. Everyone hates us because of you. We want to be with lights, which light is also a being who's super nice, and he just kind of flies around. He's barely a character, honestly. Um, so, like I said, they hate darkness, and then darkness just flies, and eventually he's like, you know what? Without the other beings, nighttime darkness doesn't really work. It's nothing. It's like a really quick scene. So he decides to kill himself pretty much, which he kind of does. So he stands still until light comes and light overtakes him, and then darkness is gone, and Orion is left on a giant turtle, by himself. And then it flashes to adult Orion telling the story to his daughter, and she's like, "What happens next?" And he's just like, "I don't know what happens next. I wrote myself in a corner." So the little girl starts telling the story, his daughter, and she's like, "Oh, well, I'm gonna be in the story." So she puts herself in the story, and she convinces Orion that, she convinces all the other beings to come help Orion bring back darkness, because she tells this poem about why darkness is good. And we also see that without darkness, like the sun is burning everyone up and everyone's miserable. And that's all they really say of why darkness is important, that without darkness, the sun will just burn us up and people can't sleep properly, which honestly doesn't really work. I think they could have done a lot more. And they do say a little bit of things, about the beauty of darkness and everything like that. But that's not really the importance of darkness or why people love darkness. The poem kind of helps the poem the story or the little girl Hypatia tells, but I just don't think it really comes together. It's a deus machina or whatever they call it, where she just comes in and fixes the story. So they put Orion to sleep, and he goes in his nightmares and his dreams where darkness is, and they save him. And then this giant portal thing opens up and starts sucking him in. I don't even know if they mentioned this portal thing. I think they did earlier. I kind of forget. So it starts sucking him up, but there's no real suspense because it's a story. We know it's a story. It's not even a story that actually happened to the dad, like I thought they were going to end up being. It's just a story because the daughter put herself in the story. So they end up waking up Orion, and they save darkness, and they're like, "Yay!" Or darkness is back, and he takes Orion and Hypatia back home, and they say the goodbyes. And again, this is where the story gets weird. And then Hypatia is like, "Oh no, how am I going to get home?" You know? and they're trying to figure out how to get it home. And all of a sudden, this little boy shows up in a time machine. He's like, "Oh, I'll take you back home, but we gotta hurry because all these time monsters are here." So they get guns and they start fighting them, and they get in a time machine. I know it sounds crazy, like it really gets crazy. And then he takes her back to the future, and then he leaves. And it turns out, again, like I mentioned earlier, this is a story that adult Orion was telling his daughter, which turns out that his adult daughter is telling her son, his grandson. So it's a story within a story within a story, which again didn't really work for me. There's no stakes in the story whatsoever. Orion doesn't learn, to be brave or anything within this story. He learns within the story of the story, but it's not a real story. It's a story that we're being told. So that's why I kind of didn't care for it. I know the story they're still telling really matters, but it's kind of pointless. It's just like, hey, let's do this, let's do this. So it doesn't work for me. And the movie ends with old man Orion and his wife, which might be his crush from the beginning of the movie. Well, I think she is. Sit down and look at the stars to appreciate nighttime. And that's where the movie ends. Like I said, that was my main problem, the story. I didn't like that it was a story within a story within a story. It kind of takes away from the actual narrative. And Orion, growing as a character, he essentially doesn't have a character arc. Because the Orion we're watching in this journey isn't an actual character. He's just a story character who, either way, doesn't really learn a lesson because all of a sudden a new character is inserted into his story to help him, complete his journey. At least that's how I felt, how it was. You might feel differently. But anyway, that was Orion in the Dark. Like I said, it was an okay average movie. I have a lot of problems with this story, but I did like the animation. I feel like they could have fixed up the story a little bit more, but it feels like the actual writers wrote themselves into a story, so they they were kind of writing themselves out of the story by making a story within a story within a story. You know what I mean? Like, again, just little elements just coming in to save the day out of nowhere. But anyway, if you watched the movie, what did you think? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Let me know in the comments below. As always, thank you for watching, like and subscribe, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace out.